Chapter 437, About My Mother. 3. Thank you. Amanda replied with a soft smile as she heard Ren's words. Directly coming out of her own match, she was quite tired. However, thinking back at her own mother's situation, she quickly discarded all of her tiredness and chose to visit Ren. Aside from the fact that she wanted to make sure he was okay, she also wanted to see if he could help her. Amanda understood her situation well. She knew that her mother's situation was dire, and she also knew that if she did nothing, the problem wouldn't solve itself. Instead of keeping the problem to herself, she took it upon herself to try asking for help, and the first person that came to her mind was Ren. She did also think about asking Kevin, but she felt more comfortable asking Ren first. Even though she was comfortably around Kevin, she felt more at peace when she was around Ren. Furthermore, having talked to him, Amanda knew that he had just come back from the Dwarven domain. She also knew that his relationship with them was good, and therefore, after carefully thinking things through, she decided to ask him if he had a way to solve the Mindbreaker curse. Her hopes were low, but nevertheless it wouldn't hurt asking. Sitting down, placing both of her hands on her laps, Amanda took a good look at the place before her eyes suddenly paused on a small black cat sitting by the edge of the window. "Pudding," she called out in surprise. A flood of memories suddenly flashed through her head as the surprise in her eyes grew only bigger. How is she here? She thought at first, but after that, staring at her fluffy fur, her right hand instantly twitched as she had a sudden urge to pet her. However, the moment Amanda's words faded, Pudding's body suddenly twitched as the room froze for a second before a wry smile appeared on Ren's face. Scratching the back of his head, Ren forced a laugh before scooching his body away from Pudding. "Haha, yes, it's Pudding." He turned his head to look away from her. Amanda tilted her head once she saw this, but recalling the purpose of her visit, she stopped paying attention to Pudding and cleared her throat. Cum. Her soft coughs rang through the room, attracting Ren's attention. Sensing the shift in Amanda's mood, he sat up straight. "What's wrong?" Brushing her hair behind her ear, Amanda softly said. "Do you remember the conversation we were having back at the tournament stands?" "Tournament stands?" Placing his hand on his chin, a thoughtful look appeared on his face as he tried his best to recall the previous conversation he had with her. As he was thinking, gazing at him from where she was sitting, Amanda took a good look at him. "He's changed," she thought. Amanda wasn't the type to care about someone's looks. However, if she had to say something, it was that the current Ren was a lot more handsome than in the past. Not only were his facial features sharper and more chiseled out, but so was his body, which previously used to be very skinny. Unknowingly, the side of her cheeks heated up, forcing her to turn her head to the side. Fortunately, the embarrassment did not last for long as Ren's loud voice echoed throughout every corner of the room. You mentioned something about your mother." His face quickly turned serious. Recollecting herself, Amanda nodded her head. "Yes. Did something happen to her?" Ren proceeded to ask before he raised his head and carefully looked around the place. "You said that she was here, but I don't see her anywhere." Ren's sudden action caught Amanda off guard as she couldn't help but smile at his actions. The way he was moving his head around to look for her mother was funny. After all, there was no one else but her in the room. He was clearly overacting for nothing. But it was because of such things that she was comfortable with him. But her smile did not last for long, as the smile soon wiped away from her face and her face darkened. "She's sick," Amanda eventually said, and Ren finally stopped moving. Following this, worry and surprise flashed across his eyes. Leaning forward, he asked, "If I may ask, what happened to her?" Amanda nodded her head. She had already braced herself to tell everything that had happened to him. Biting the bottom of her lips, she took a deep breath before she started to recount to him everything that had happened not too long ago with the Elf Queen. From how she brought her to this strange place, to how she told her about the situation with her mother, and how she had saved the Queen's life. As she spoke, she made sure to not miss out a single detail. "After reaching the place, I saw my mother resting inside of a large capsule. Although she didn't look exactly like in my memories, I could still tell that she was my mother." With every word that Amanda spoke, the heaviness in her chest slowly started to lift away as her words became clearer. It felt as though a heavy burden had been lifted away from her, making her talk more calmly. "The Queen said that my mother is currently under the Mindbreaker curse, and that if nothing is done, she will forever be trapped in the capsule, without any hope of ever waking up again." It wasn't long before she finally finished recounting everything. With her head lowered, she had a bitter look on her face. Clenching her fist, she softly muttered, "I know that you probably don't know anything about my current situation and that I'm probably adding to your burdens, but I'm glad you listened to what I had to say." A bitter and sad smile soon appeared on her face. To her, this felt more like a venting session. From the beginning, she never placed much hope in Rin being able to have a solution to her problem, but even then she wanted him to at least know her current situation. Lifting her head up and preparing herself to leave, her body suddenly froze when she saw Ren's face. Staring at Amanda, who was looking back at me, I was left momentarily speechless. Recalling the words she said to me as she recounted the events that led to her finding out that her mother was alive, I really couldn't help but be inwardly shocked. There was such a story. This was the first thought that came to my mind. Moreover, what was even more shocking was the fact that I didn't know of such an important matter. Especially if it was regarding Amanda, one of the main characters of the story. Was it purposely left out by the entity? I thought to myself as I tried to make heads or tails about the situation. Although it was a far-fetched possibility, I knew that I needed to take this matter into consideration. As far-fetched as it was, the possibility of it biting me in the ass in the future wasn't impossible. However, it was then that I suddenly recalled something important. Focusing my attention back towards Amanda, who looked extremely down, I softly said, "Actually, I know of a way to cure the curse of your mother." Huh. It took a moment for Amanda to react, but the moment she processed those words, she stood up in shock and looked at me with eyes filled with a mixture of shock and surprise. "Really?" she asked with a voice filled with hope. I nodded my head. "Yes, I do. The Mindbreaker curse." Thinking back to the past when I went to Amora with Kevin to collect the cure, I would have never thought that I would have to use them again. Actually, now that I think about it, wasn't there someone that was supposed to be healed by the fruits? The whole reason why Kevin went to Amora was to collect the Zurin fruits in order to heal someone from the Mindbreaker curse. Was that someone Amanda's mother? If so, why did I know nothing about this? Moreover, if I pieced everything together, Kevin went to Amora when he was ranked and the timing perfectly coincided with the current timing. Was I missing something? The more I thought about it, the more perplexed I became. Was that information purposely omitted? I really didn't know, and I wasn't too happy about this. However, even though I wanted to think more about it, staring at Amanda, who seemed to be looking at me with eyes filled with hope, I smiled at her. "You don't have to worry too much about your mother's situation. I have a cure for her." Amanda's shoulders suddenly started to tremble upon hearing my words, but before I could say anything else, she quickly closed her eyes and calmed herself down. Soon, opening her eyes once again, a calm look appeared on her face. It became clear to me that she didn't want to let her emotions take control of her rationality. A smile appeared on my face when I saw this. She was a strong girl and I quite liked her for that. "Thank you," she softly whispered before sitting back down on her chair. There was a mixture of relief, gratitude, and even something else in her voice that I couldn't quite understand. "Here." Taking out a small card from my dimensional space, I tossed it towards Amanda, who caught it with one hand. Lowering her head, she looked at the card with a confused look on her face. "What is this?" "Those are the keys to my room," I calmly replied. "If you go to my room, there should be a safe over by the room. The passcode is 887,930. And over there you should be able to find my dimensional bracelet. In it is the fruit that can cure your mother of the curse." As I had a very big match, afraid that my dimensional space would break during the fight, I decided to store all my important items inside of another dimensional space before putting it inside of a safe. The red book was also stored inside of the safe. I would have gone in her stead, but at the moment I wasn't really in the condition to go, so I could only have her go for me. Clenching onto the card with her hand, Amanda gratefully looked in my direction before she took a deep breath. Biting her lips softly, she once again muttered, "Thank you. Don't mention it." Waving my hand, I leaned back on my bed. Although the Zurin fruit was worth quite a lot, I didn't regret giving it to Amanda. Aside from being one of the closest people to me, she was also someone that went through a lot. In fact, the situation with her father was probably a result of my own actions, and I felt a little bit guilty about that. Yes, her father would have always gone to the demon realm, however, it wasn't meant to be that early. My actions changed the future and as a result, caused him to go under even more danger than he was supposed to. Standing up, with the card to my room tightly clenched inside of her hand, Amanda mumbled something before leaving the room. I will definitely pay you back. It was faint, but I heard it. Before I could say anything else, opening the door, Amanda directly left the room, once again leaving me alone with Angelica inside the room. Covering my face with my hand, I leaned back on the bed as I thought. I'm glad I was of help. Right as I was about to go to sleep, a shadow cast over me. Frowning and opening my eyes, I was left startled by Angelica's presence. With both of her brows locked tightly, a complicated look flashed across her face. Realizing that something was wrong, I opened my mouth and asked, "What's wrong?" However, I wished I never said those words, as her next words caused my body to freeze entirely. If you don't want to die, you need to stop her from curing her mother. Chapter 438 about my mother. If you don't want to die, you need to stop her from curing her mother. Angelica's words echoed throughout the room, and my body froze as a result of her words. Following which, my head snapped in her direction. What are you talking about? I will die if Amanda cures her mother? What in the world was she on about? Sitting back down on her chair and crossing her legs, Angelica nodded her head. A heavy solemnness descended upon the room. Sitting up straight, I waited for her to speak. After a short pause, Angelica opened her mouth and asked, "Do you remember when we signed a contract?" "Yes. How could I forget? It was a couple of days after I managed to defeat her and wanted to make her join my group." But why was she suddenly asking about this? Pursing her lips, Angelica's delicate brows knit together before she finally let out a long sigh. "I'll cut straight to the point. The person who has cursed Amanda's mother was me." Huh. My eyes instantly opened wide upon hearing her words. Out of nowhere, Angelica suddenly dropped a bombshell on me. My mouth opened and closed repeatedly as I struggled to find the right words to say. I finally understood the meaning of her previous words. In no way, shape, or form can party A harm party B, and vice versa. This was one of the clauses in the mana contract that we signed, and me giving Amanda's mother the cure would be a direct breach of the contract, as it would directly harm Angelica. This clause was also the reason why Angelica told me about the situation. If she didn't tell me, she would also be breaking the clause. I had many questions that I wanted to ask. However, I knew that I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. Closing my eyes and calming my uneven heartbeat, I opened them again and looked around. Then, glancing at Angelica from the corner of my eyes, I spoke inside of my mind. "In case someone overhears our conversation, it's best if the two of us telepathically talk." "Okay." Angelica nodded her head. After which, demonic energy suddenly sprung forth from her body as she once again returned to her cat form. Jumping onto the bed, she once again made a move for the ledge of the window. Once she settled down, she proceeded to look out of the window. While this was happening, taking another deep breath and trying to calm my mind, which was currently in shambles, I proceeded to question Angelica. "Please tell me the full story so that I can make a proper judgment." There were many things that I wanted to ask her, but instead of asking them, I opted to listen to her side of the story first. From there, if there were any more things I was uncertain of, I would proceed to ask. Before then, I just wanted to hear what she had to say for herself regarding the matter. I didn't want to make any rash decisions. Raising her paw and caressing her head, mimicking a cat's movement, Angelica nodded her head before her voice entered my mind. "It happened a while back. About 15 years in the past, if I don't remember wrongly." My brows furrowed. 15 years back. That was quite a while ago. Was Amanda's dad even highly ranked back then? It had to be noted that humans didn't live for as long as demons did, and therefore 15 years was quite a lot of time. If it was 15 years ago, I doubted that Amanda's father was even S-ranked. However, that still wouldn't be able to explain how she was able to curse Amanda's mother. After all, he may have not been S-ranked, but the disparity in strength should have been big. Back then, I was only a Baron-ranked demon, and was newly elected as the matriarch of the Charm tribe. As the newly elected matriarch, I was very ambitious, and an opportunity presented itself. Angelica paused and looked at me. Pinching the middle of my brows, I proceeded to ask, "Could that opportunity have anything to do with you cursing Amanda's mother?" Turning her head and twirling her tail in the air, Angelica softly replied, "It is exactly that." Upon hearing her words, the confusion within me grew. "Tell me more about this opportunity. I mean, no offense, but I seriously doubt that you have the ability to actually be able to curse her mother. Even if it was 15 years in the past, Angelica shouldn't have been strong enough to do that." Fortunately, Angelica's next words managed to resolve some of my doubts. Your words are correct. I was indeed too weak back then to actually curse her mother. Although Amanda's father was not the guild leader just yet, the security around her mother was simply too much for a Baron-ranked demon like me, even if I had the support of my tribe. Well, yeah. That is to be expected. Amanda's mother was the wife of the guild master of the #1 guild in the human domain. Regardless of how weak humanity was, it was still a powerhouse that most demons wouldn't dare touch without proper preparations. Since the security was so tight, how were you able to curse Amanda's mother? I had support. Angelica quickly replied. My head jumped up when I heard this as an idea suddenly formulated inside of my mind. Could it be the Lust clan? Indeed. Angelica nodded her head and I covered my face with my hand. Fuck, no wonder you were able to curse her. Unlike the Charm tribe, the Lust clan was an enormous demon organization. If I had to estimate its power, it was probably stronger than the current union, and not just stronger but incomparably stronger. It also had to be noted that there were 6 other clans of similar strength. If not for the other races being the priority, humanity would have long been wiped out. In the midst of my thoughts, Angelica continued. The Lust clan is enormous and powerful. More so than you can ever imagine. The tribe that I was in, the Charm tribe, is a small tribe that was branched out to the human domain in order to expand the influence of the clan. Angelica suddenly paused and turned to look at me, trying to make sure that I understood. Giving her a slight nod, she continued. As the representative of the Charm tribe, I was selected as the demon who was going to place the curse on Amanda's mother. The main purpose of this was, as you probably already figured out, was to try to take over the #1 guild in the human domain. I get that, but why you? Couldn't they have chosen a stronger demon? Can't. Angelica shook her head. Back then, the stronger demons were still busy trying to settle down on Earth and were also fighting against the other races. Listening to her words, I still had some doubts. Honestly, I really didn't buy the whole idea of Angelica being selected out of all the other demons that could have been chosen. There was most likely something that she didn't want to tell me, and although I wanted to know, I didn't push it. There was probably a reason why she didn't want to tell me. Since the mana contract stated that she couldn't think of doing any harm to me in any way, shape or form, I could tell that she wasn't divulging this with me in order to protect me. Or perhaps something else. I really wasn't sure at this point. Scooting my body back, I placed my hand over my chin and fell into thought. After a while, I looked at Angelica and shared my findings. In short, I can already predict what happened next. With the aid of the Lust clan, you were somehow able to curse her. However, the moment you tried to threaten her, instead of following your orders, she directly ran away. Not wanting to disappoint the Lust clan, you tried to chase after her and somehow failed, resulting in you activating the curse. Upon activating the curse, you thought that she had died and forgot all about her. It didn't really take a genius to get the gist of the situation, and when I was done recounting my speculation, Angelica could only helplessly nod her head. That's correct. However, back then I really thought that I had killed her. I get what you mean. Amanda's mom could count herself lucky. Had it not been the queen that was next to her, she would have died a long time ago. Raising my head, a sudden thought occurred to me. Hold on, was this failure the reason why you chose to attack Amanda a while back? Turning her head, Angelica's voice softened. Yes. I see. Petty one, I see. Because of her failure with Amanda's mother, it seemed like she held a grudge against Amanda. Still, this sudden revelation by Angelica caused the gears of my brain to turn. Something about this situation was odd. Very odd. For a situation like this to have occurred, I felt that something wasn't right. From my memories of Amanda's mother being completely gone to Angelica's sudden involvement with me. It felt as though this scenario had been carefully set up in order to trap me and stop me from healing Amanda's mother. Raising my head, I turned to look at Angelica before asking. Angelica, remember the time when you said that someone gave you a photo of me, telling you that I was the one responsible for Elijah's death? Upon hearing my words, Angelica's eyes turned into thin slits as her voice became slightly colder. Of course, I didn't forget. You said that you don't exactly remember what happened since your memories of that time were cleared out. However, you did say that the individual involved was a demon, right? My mouth twitched when I heard the coldness hidden in her voice. However, as thick-skinned as I was, I decided to just pretend to not have felt it. You said that you don't exactly remember what happened since your memories of that time were cleared out. However, You did say that the individual involved was a demon, right? Correct. Angelica replied, her voice a little bit less cold. Upon hearing her words, only one name popped up inside my mind. Everblood. Back then, when I was trying to figure out who was responsible for instigating Angelica to attack me, I remembered calculating the possibility of Everblood being the one responsible for the whole scenario, and not too long ago, I also came to the conclusion that Everblood may have been a pawn set up by the other entity. After all, he was the demon responsible for getting my hands on Monarch's indifference. It was a far-fetched theory, but this event strengthened that hypothesis. Not only was the scenario a bit too coincidental, but thinking about how that entity knew the ins and outs of my personality, I didn't for once doubt that me picking up Angelica and making her my partner was a part of his plan. Just how much have you planned out? Over 3 years had passed ever since contracting Angelica, and not once had I ever thought that such a possibility was possible. For how long had the entity inside of me planned everything? My stomach churned at the thought. Fuck. Eventually, a curse escaped from my mouth. It had finally dawned on me just how serious the situation was. Turning my head to look at Angelica, my head started to hurt. Just how was I going to solve this situation? Should I just tell Amanda the truth and hope for her to accept the fact that I was working with the demon responsible for tearing her family and childhood apart? Or should I just make up a random excuse and tell her to wait for a couple of years, till the contract ended? Clenching my head with both hands, I groaned out loud. Ugh, this is the worst. Was there really no other way out? Just as I was losing all hope, Angelica suddenly spoke up. A complicated look appeared on her face when she said those words. Actually, there might be a way. Chapter 439, About My Mother. 5. Actually, there might be a way, Angelica said with a complicated look on her face. Her words reignited hope within me, however, that was quickly dashed away when I realized that there was no free lunch in this world. Indeed, there may have been a way, but there was most definitely going to be a cost associated with that way. Closing my eyes and taking a deep breath to collect myself, I opened them up again and asked, "What is the way?" "Breaking the contract." "You know that's not really possible. Mana contracts, regardless of the parties, could not be broken. The reason for this was unknown. The same went for skills. No one really knew why they existed. Well, that was back in the past. I now knew. It was because of the Akashic records. They were the entity responsible for creating the laws of the world, and in this case, the law that they had set was that mana contracts couldn't be broken. Was there a deeper reason for this? I really wasn't sure. That aside, it was because of this rule that people were extremely apprehensive when signing a mana contract. Since both parties couldn't break the contract, if both were unable to fill the requirements set in the contract, both parties may end up bound together for life. Furthermore, I didn't want to break my contract with Angelica. Not only was she a powerful ally that I could trust, but all the previous plans that I had made with Silig would go to waste. I couldn't really afford to lose those. Angelica also seemed to have understood this point as she quickly shook her head. "No, it's not that." Pausing, Angelica stroked her ears with her paw and carefully said, "The contract we signed back then, if I don't recall wrongly, its grade is not that strong. Right?" I nodded my head. As I've said before, there were different grades to a mana contract. Each grade meant for a different rank and individual it could bind. The grades went from E, with E being the highest. For obvious reasons, back then I couldn't have afforded a mana contract. In fact, even now I couldn't afford a mana contract. Its price was way too high. Those kinds of contracts were not only hard to get but had little to no supply and extremely high demand. It wasn't something I could get my hands on. Back then, with the money I had, I only managed to get my hands on a grade 3 contract. This was the standard grade contract and could bind individuals whose strength was around 2 rank, which was my exact rank. Back when we signed it, if I don't remember incorrectly, I think I was Baron ranked while you were still somewhere around D to E rank. Yes. I was indeed around that rank when I first met her. Still, my eyes squinted as I tried to understand what she was trying to get at. That was back then. Right now I'm a count ranked demon while you're ranked just around the threshold of the mana contract rank effectiveness. Hearing Angelica's words, I suddenly slapped the palm of my hand. How come I didn't think of that? It didn't take too long for me to understand what she was trying to hint at, and when I realized what her plan was, a mixture of surprise and caution washed over my face. She was basically hinting at the fact that there was a chance for me to survive the backlash of the contract. As long as I managed to break through to rank, I would have a very real possibility of surviving the ordeal. That being said, even if I exceeded the rank grade, there was still a very real chance for me to suffer serious consequences. The possibility of death may have been significantly lowered, but it wasn't exactly off the table. To make matters worse, even if I did end up surviving the backlash of the contract, it wouldn't break. It would just repeat the same thing at the next violation. You know the consequences of forcefully enduring the backlash of the contract, right? Angelica asked, her voice deepening as she leaped off the ledge. Yes. I closed my eyes and nodded. Then opening them up again, I looked at Angelica and asked, "But what about you? Won't you suffer a backlash from breaking the curse?" "I will," Angelica replied with a soft voice. "However, the backlash will not be too troublesome for me. Maybe by a month's time I will recover. About you?" Angelica suddenly frowned. Before she could say anything else, I cut her off. "It's fine. I can take it." Raising my head and staring towards the ceiling of the room, I softly murmured, "I don't think it will be a problem." Honestly, I know this might be a dumb move on my part, but I felt that this was the only way to resolve everything perfectly. There was a probability of me dying, but I think with enough preparations I could avoid it. Even then, I would without a doubt suffer heavy consequences. I wasn't sure how much. Perhaps it could even go as far as me losing a rank and obviously kicking me out of the tournament due to the injuries, but I felt like this was the right thing to do. My mind suddenly halted as my thoughts paused there. A sudden thought struck me. Do I perhaps like Amanda? Was the reason why I was going to make such a rash decision because I had feelings for Amanda? If I thought about it, I wasn't the type to risk my life for the sake of others unless it jeopardized my own. It just wasn't me, yet here I was now just about to do that same exact thing. I couldn't quite comprehend the feelings I was having. Sure, Amanda was beautiful, drop-dead gorgeous if I had to add, but I had seen plenty of other beautiful girls in my life. Yet thinking about the possibility of her hating me, my decision in letting Amanda hand her mother the fruit became more resolute. Deep down inside, I knew that if I did nothing about the situation and Amanda found out everything, our relationship would reach a point where we would never be able to talk again, and I really didn't want that. But did this mean that I liked her? I really don't know. I ruffled my hair into a mess. The more I tried to rack my brain over the matter, the more confused I became. I really knew nothing about romance, and honestly I had not been with Amanda long enough to think of her as a romantic interest. Yet why did I not want her to hate me? Like. Just as the storm inside my mind was starting to stir even more wildly, the door to the room opened up and Amanda walked in. In her hand was my bracelet. Walking up to me, her soft footsteps rang throughout the room before she handed me the bracelet. "Here. Thank you." Taking the bracelet from her, I quickly focused my attention on the bracelet. Somehow, I couldn't muster the courage to see her face. Channeling my mana into it, after a couple of seconds I took out a familiar-looking fruit. The Zuran fruit, and the fruit responsible for curing Amanda's mother of her curse. Feeling the fruit in my hand, it suddenly felt a lot heavier than I thought. It felt as though I was holding onto a large 500-kilogram dumbbell. I knew that this was all fruit of my imagination, and a complicated look flashed across my face. However, realizing that Amanda was here, I forced a smile and handed it to her. "This is the fruit that can cure your mother." With her eyes locked onto the fruit in my hand, Amanda didn't speak. However, I could see hope glimmer inside of her as she eyed the fruit in my hand. Extending her hand, Amanda flinched and retrieved it before turning to look at me and politely asking, "May I?" "Go ahead," I replied whilst extending my hand, urging her to take the fruit. Mustering some courage, Amanda eventually extended her hand and took the fruit. Then retrieving it, she started to carefully examine it in her hand. As all of her attention was focused on the fruit, I took this chance to finally take a good look at her, and the moment I did, a thought suddenly crossed my mind. She looks like a cat that just found its favorite toy. It was quite cute. The way that her eyes would dart around the fruit, and her subtle changes in facial expressions were quite a comical scene for me to see. Haha. Before I knew it, a small laugh escaped from my mouth. I instantly covered my mouth when I realized what I did. Unfortunately, it seemed as though I had laughed a little bit too loudly as Amanda's voice soon reached my ears. "Is something funny?" Glancing around the room and seeing that we were the only two people present aside from Angelica, I just decided to come clean. "You." My response seemed to have taken Amanda by surprise as she cocked her head to the side, letting her glossy black hair fall off her shoulders. What did I do? You just looked really funny. You reminded me of pudding. I shrugged and replied honestly. The way she curiously looked at the fruit, and how she usually never displayed her emotions. The more I thought about it, the more similarities I found between the two. I chuckled once again. Pudding. As I was laughing, Amanda's eyes turned into slits before she turned to face Angelica, who was looking back at her. The moment the eyes of the two met, Amanda's hand flinched once again. With a look of uncertainty, raising and lowering her hand a couple of times, Amanda eventually lowered it. It seemed as though Angelica's stare was just too much for her. She must really want to pet her. I thought when I saw her act that way. Pulling me down from the cheerful moment, I suddenly heard Angelica's solemn voice in my head. So you're really going to do this? Yeah. I replied back inside of my mind. This time my voice was a lot firmer. I understand. Angelica nodded before curling her body on the ledge. The moment she did that, from the corner of my eyes, I saw Amanda lower her head as a trace of disappointment flashed across her face. I secretly smiled when I saw that. But that smile did not last for long, as I remembered the conversation I previously had with Angelica about what happened with her mother. Frankly speaking, I did not hold any resentment nor blame Angelica for what she did. I did not have the right to. Angelica was a demon through and through. Her actions were something she did for her race, and I understood that. The situation was messed up, but I couldn't blame Angelica for anything. Just the fact that she was willing to go through the pain of having the curse broken was proof to me that she was different in the past. And even if she wasn't, I honestly didn't care. She was not my pet. She was herself. Closing my eyes and pursing my lips, I turned my attention toward Amanda. Amanda, when are you going to give your mother the fruit? After the next round. Amanda replied after a short pause. I see. Nodding my head, I didn't question why she decided to delay her mother's cure, but this was good. By the time the next round happened, I would have made enough preparations to be able to survive the ordeal. I may end up having to forfeit the tournament, but that was fine. Although there was a certain item that interested me, it wasn't going to be the end of the world. Despite the fact that the memories inside of my head no longer coincided with reality, I still knew of a couple of items that I could collect to further boost my strength. This little setback was nothing to me, and honestly I was tired. Tired of all the fighting and constant problems that would show up one after another. I just wanted to go back home. Chapter 441, Last Match. 1. Click. The door closed and silence enshrouded the room. Leaning back on my bed, I looked towards the ceiling of the room. How troublesome, I muttered to myself. It wasn't long before I heard Angelica's voice inside of my head. Are you really going to drop out of the tournament? You could have just told her to wait after the tournament, right? About that. Turning my attention back toward Angelica, a bitter smile flashed across my face. Before I could say anything, Angelica spoke up once again. If you had participated till the end, you would have most likely won the whole thing. That Kevin friend of yours, he's weaker than you. Closing my eyes and taking a deep breath, I couldn't really deny her words. Even though we had not fought each other yet, I could tell that the current Kevin was weaker than me. Not only did I know the ins and outs of how he fought, but I also had plenty of experience when it came to fighting. I didn't waste my time in Himmler after all. Just the knowledge of how Kevin fought was enough for me to be able to beat him, let alone all the experience that I had accumulated. If you know that he's weaker than you, why are you just quitting the tournament? It's 'cause I'm tired. Tired. Angelica replied, her voice sounding surprised. Brushing my hair back, my hand soon paused on a certain part of my head before I started to scratch it. Yeah, I'm tired of all the constant problems that keep popping out of nowhere. I just want to relax for once. Have a breather. I had already exposed myself and I had proven my strength. The opponents, I could probably beat the all. There was no need for me to continue the tournament anymore. Most importantly, and the real reason why I no longer cared about continuing the tournament, was that I no longer cared about the top prize. The only incentive the tournament had was the top prize. It was the only reason why I ever joined the tournament in the first place. However, this no longer applied anymore. After hearing from Amanda just how much the Elven Queen cared about her mother, I figured that my gesture might end up earning her favor. If that happened, what was the point of winning the tournament? Might as well get this event over fast. Just to clarify, the reason why I gave Amanda the Zurin fruit wasn't because I wanted to earn the Queen's favor. The possibility of earning her favor only occurred to me after I handed her the fruit, and hence why I no longer held the tournament with as much importance as before. Stroking the bottom of my chin, my mind shifted toward a different topic. Right, I should also break through right about soon. The higher ranked I was, the greater the possibility of me surviving. The only hope I had when this happened was for me to not suddenly lose a rank. Though the chances weren't exactly high, it was still possible. In hindsight, even if I did end up losing a rank, I'd just go back to where I was now. Also, that was only applicable if I truly did lose a rank. There might be a slim chance that I might just have to suffer an inhuman amount of pain, and I was fine with that. Nothing could be worse than what happened to me at the monolith, right? I hope so. In the midst of my thoughts, I suddenly felt a shape gaze coming from my left side. I didn't need to look to understand to who the gaze belonged to. Why are you looking at me like that? I'm curious. Why didn't you tell the truth to that girl? Truth? I wryly smiled. You do know that if the Elven Queen comes to know of your involvement with the situation, you might die without knowing how you died. Though I didn't think that Amanda would say anything, I really couldn't afford to lose Angelica. This was the best option that I could think of. I didn't think of that. Angelica eventually said inside of my head upon hearing my words. Her voice sounded much fainter. Yeah, we can't really afford to say too much. Interlocking my fingers together, I extended my arms and stretched. Ugh. Let me start making preparations. Just as I had set my mind to prepare myself for the upcoming event, my watch suddenly vibrated. It's probably the matchups for the round of 16. I thought when I felt the vibration. Trying. Lowering my head and staring at the message written in it, my face froze. What is it? In the midst of my sudden behavior, Angelica's voice reached my ears. Turning to look in her direction, a bitter smile appeared on my face. Lifting my arm and turning my wrist, the smile on my face became even more bitter. My next opponent is a really thought one, you see. == Round of 16. Rindover versus Kevin Voss. So much for the speech about being tired and all. Sigh, really, what kind of dogshit luck is this? For Kevin to be my next opponent, truly I couldn't understand how luck was my highest stat. Seriously. Late night. Inside a small room, quietly laying down on a bed, was a beautiful girl with auburn hair that scattered all over the pillow. Her faint rhythmical breathing echoed throughout the lonesome room. Twitch. Suddenly one of the girl's eyes twitched. It was very subtle and almost unnoticeable. As the room was currently empty, no one was unable to notice this. Twitch. 10 more minutes passed, and after the first twitch came the second and then the third twitch. Before she knew it, Emma opened her eyes, and then the first thing that she saw was a plain white ceiling. What happened to me? She wondered to herself. Her memories were blurry and she barely had any recollections of what had happened. That didn't last for long, as memories soon started to flood her mind, reminding her of exactly what happened. I lost. Aaron's face suddenly popped up inside of Emma's head as the memories started crashing down on her head. She could clearly remember the moment when he suddenly appeared behind her and stabbed her in the back. Had it not been for the referee's intervention, she might have died there and then. I was careless. Emma clenched her fist when she thought about her loss. She already knew from the beginning that her chances of beating him were low. Because of everything that had happened with her uncle, a lot of her resources were cut out from her, resulting in her strength being a notch behind the others. Secretly, this had been eating away at her. Watching her friends and people close to her slowly surpass her, leaving her behind, Emma truly felt inferior. As a result, she decided to train even harder. The lack of resources truly made it hard for her to keep up with Kevin and the others. However, through her sheer willpower and perseverance, she was able to get to where she was now. Rank almost. It may have not been outstanding compared to Kevin and others, but it was still amongst the top in her generations. The reason why she fought Aaron was that she wanted to prove herself. She wanted to prove to Kevin and the others that she wasn't some dead weight. Even if she might end up losing against Aaron, she thought that it would have been a great experience for her. It would help her identify her own weakness to later work on and develop. Unfortunately, she had been too naive. Just because Aaron was also a human, it didn't mean that he wouldn't try to kill her during the tournament. She had joined the tournament with the wrong mindset, and she ended up paying a heavy price for this naive thinking. Lifting her head up and looking around the room, Emma wondered out loud. Where are the others? But then when she realized that was dark outside, she understood that they were most likely sleeping. Massaging her head with her hand, Emma leaned her body to the side and tried to get out of bed. Huh. But as she tried to move, her face suddenly froze. Moving her arm down, she once again tried to get out of the bed. Her face stiffened as soon as she tried to move her legs once again. I can't move my legs. Her face dyed with horror as she came to a sudden realization. She could no longer move her legs. Lifting her body up with both arms behind her, Emma tried to shift her body around the bed, in hopes of seeing if she still had some feelings in her legs, but it was all to no avail as she eventually realized that she could no longer move them. Once the realization dawned on her, instead of crying or panicking, she simply laid back on the bed with a listless expression on her face. A deep silence enshrouded the room following this. Maybe this is for the better, she eventually murmured, breaking the silence. Closing her eyes, she quickly accepted her circumstances. She knew that this was a result of her own failure and carelessness. Staring at the ceiling of the room, her eyes eventually dulled as she thought. Maybe this really is for the better. I've already been holding everyone back with my problems. At the same time, in a lush green forest. Bang! A thunderous sound echoed throughout the forest as a boulder shattered into dust particles. The leaves rustled and the grass bent in a prostrating fashion. With a somewhat rough breath, Kevin's crimson-red eyes shined, admitting the darkness as they locked onto the area where the boulder used to stand. Raising his hand, he wiped the sweat that had accumulated on his forehead. Sigh. A long sigh escaped from Kevin's mouth as he looked at his watch. Following this, a rare trace of solemnness appeared on his face. Although I expected this to happen, I didn't expect for it to happen so soon. It had to be said that they were still in the round of 16. The chances of them meeting may have not been low at around 1/32, but still, Kevin had hoped that they would see each other much further down the tournament. But alas, it was only wishful thinking on his end. The drawings were random, so he couldn't complain. The only problem he had was, however, the Elven Tear situation. If he lost the match, then he would be unable to get them. He thought about asking Rin to get it for him in the chance he lost, but he quickly shook his head. Rin might do it if he asked, but Kevin had his own pride. The Elven Tear was something he needed to win, not Rin or anyone else. Furthermore, he didn't want Rin to go easy on him. He truly wanted to fight him, with the both of them going all out. Kevin had a general idea of what Rin went through after his death, and he understood the difference between the two of them. However, just because Rin had been through such hardship didn't mean that he had been standing idle. Not only did he have Donna personally tutor him throughout the whole of the 3 years, but he had also gone through many missions where he had killed and gotten rid of monolith-associated organizations. The resources the system provided him were also boundless. Simply put, although he knew that Rin was strong, possibly even stronger than him, Kevin was not scared the least bit. Rather, he was excited. Excited at the prospect of finally being able to determine who was better between the two of them. Chapter 441, One Last Match, 2. Then high noon sun was blazing intensely hot, as the world was enveloped by a bright light. 2 days had passed since the round of 32, and today was the round of 16. Right now, the area below the tree where the tournament was held was packed with people. A bustling and boisterous atmosphere enshrouded the place. Seated amongst the many spectators, Han Yufei quietly gazed in the direction of where the tournament stage was. Replays of Ren's match against Keimer flashed across his mind as his fists clenched tightly. I was right in admitting defeat to him last time. The reason why he had given up when fighting Ren was because he felt that he was holding back when fighting against him. Turns out his speculation was correct. Ren had truly been holding back when fighting him. The image of him pummeling down Keimer was deeply engraved inside Han Yufei's mind, and he could never take it away from his sight. It would forever be engraved in his mind. Crazy. Han Yufei ended up muttering to himself. They were both the same age, yet the gap between them was so big. He now understood where his confidence came from when he met him last time. He was confident that he could convince him through his domineering strength. And Han Yufei had to admit, he truly had won him over in terms of strength. Just recalling how he had won the match, Han Yufei's heart couldn't help but be moved. It made him rethink about the offer. If before he was sure about refusing, now he wasn't so sure. However, before he could think things through, a new shocking development happened. Kevin Voss versus Rendover. This piece of news, completely shook Han Yufei, who couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate with excitement. There was another person that Han Yufei couldn't properly gauge the strength of, and that was Kevin. Regardless of how much he trained for the whole 3 years he had been at the lock, he had never once been able to come close to him. He had always been reaching out his hand trying to grab onto his back, but not once had he ever come close to his level. Being the heir of the Han clan, Han Yufei was naturally proudful, but whenever he tried to compare himself to Kevin and now even Ren, he couldn't fathom how in the world he was going to come close to their level. Even so, Han Yufei was not the jealous type. Just because the two of them had surpassed him, it didn't mean that he felt any jealousy or envy against them. He just simply wanted to be like them, and recalling the conversation with Ren, Han Yufei had an inkling feeling that Ren might truly be able to help him reach his limits. Crossing his arms and leaning back on his seat, Han Yufei took a deep breath. He had finally decided. If Ren won this match or truly convinced him of his strength, then he, Han Yufei, will talk it out with his family about the possibility of joining him. Human domain. Click. Turning on the channel that broadcasted the tournament, a boiling atmosphere enshrouded the human domain. Kevin versus Ren. Banners and posters spread across every street as heavy excitement flashed across the faces of many individuals who were all eagerly waiting for the upcoming duel. There were some dissatisfactions about the matchup since there could only be one winner and both sides were human, but those were only in the minority. At the moment, everyone just wanted to see who between the two youths was the strongest. Was it Kevin, the individual who had many accomplishments to his name and was named to be the next generational talent, or was it Ren, a dark horse that had emerged from out of nowhere? Everyone wanted to know. Welcome everybody, thank you all for joining us today. It was then that two familiar faces finally showed up on the screens of everyone's devices. The two individuals were none other than Zach and Lorena. With a bright smile on her face, Lorena spoke up. I'm sure you're all tuned in today for one reason and one reason only. Extending her hand, she proceeded to tap onto the table. Two holographic images appeared in front of her when she did so. The two holographic images were the images of Ren and Kevin. By the side was a brief overview of their data. From the description of how they looked, height, age, and what weapon they specialized in. Covered most of the basics. This match was a long time coming. Even though it happened a lot faster than it was originally intended, it was still inevitable for us to see the clash between these two giants. Ren Dover and Kevin Voss. Lorena said as she swiped her hand. At her action, images of the arena grounds appeared by the side of her face. Then turning her head towards her colleague, she asked, Zach, who do you think will win the match between the two of them? The moment she asked that question, almost all of the viewers dropped whatever they were doing and paid close attention to Zach's answer. Although he was only in ranked hero and did not have as much battle awareness as ranked ones, Zach was an expert in the field. After having watched many matches in the past, he somewhat was able to give an accurate analysis of the situation, and therefore clearing his throat, Zach began to speak, sharing what he thought to the world. It's hard to make a proper assessment. Let's take aside the fact that not much is known regarding the contestant Ren Dover. We also do not know the limits of the other contestant, Kevin Voss. All we've seen him do is kill Aaron with one move, and that was only for a split second. We truly didn't see the limit of his power. Even then, what we did was truly something extraordinary. Extending his hand, Zach pressed onto the table and multiple magazines appeared on the side of the screen. Even though Kevin has not shown much in the tournament, the same couldn't be said for when he was here in the human domain. In fact, most of you viewers have already seen his exploits in the past. Extending his hand, he pinched his fingers and dragged a specific article toward himself. Following this, he pinched in an outward manner, causing the article to expand in front of him. Just a year ago, back when he was still rank, Kevin managed to clear out 2 large demon pill warehouses. Not only that, but it is also stated that he managed to defeat 2 ranked individuals in the process. Let me repeat, a rank defeating 2 ranks. That's almost similar to his opponent Ren Dover, who defeated his opponent whose rank was at rank. Once again extending his hand, Zach grabbed multiple news articles and expanded them for the audience to see them. This isn't even the first time this happened. As you can see, there are several similar accidents in the past where Kevin Voss displayed his immaculate talent. The Sanabria accident, the Culane Tower accident. The list goes on and on. Taking his eyes away from the articles, Zach stroked his hands together. What I'm trying to say is that Kevin has an incredible amount of combat experience, especially when dealing with opponents that far outstripped him in power. Clenching his hand into a fist, the articles disappeared, and Zack once again turned to look at the camera pointing in his direction. There is nothing to doubt about Kevin's skills. If he was put up against Keimer, there is a chance he could have won as well. Especially after his match with Aaron. Pressing onto the table, replays of Kevin's match with Aaron appeared on the screens of the viewers. Following this, he dragged his finger across the screen to slow down the video as much as possible and continued. During that fight, his speed skyrocketed to almost rank. Without a doubt, he has the capabilities to beat Ren, whom we know not a lot about apart from what he's shown. Extending his hands, he looked at the cameras and concluded. Don't get me wrong, I'm not belittling Ren's abilities, but I simply don't know enough about his abilities to make a proper assessment. All I can do is tell you how I feel things are, and from what Ren has shown he might not be able to beat Kevin. Nodding her head by the side, Lorena brightly smiled before adding. Talking about what he's shown, he's the inheritor of the famed keiki style. A style that pursues absolute speed, right? You're absolutely right, Lorena. Zack nodded his head, placing both of his hands on the table. He is indeed the inheritor of the keiki style, a famous 5-star art that was previously thought to have been lost. Raising his head and massaging the bottom of his chin, Zack concluded. From what we've seen in their fight, Rin is an incredibly strong individual whose specialty lies in his quick-thinking abilities and sword style. On the other hand, Kevin's style is somewhat similar, but his swordsmanship seems to be a lot more refined and well-trained. Coupled with his other incredibly assets, I'm still of the opinion that Kevin will win this. A confident smile appeared on Zack's face when he said that. He had thought things through thoroughly, and after a lot of contemplation, the result of his analysis was that Kevin would inevitably end up beating Ren. He was almost certain of this. It will be a close fight, but I give the edge to Kevin. By his side, Loren nodded her head in agreement. I'm also with you on that one. Before she could say anything else, the two of them suddenly saw two figures appear on the arena grounds and immediately sat up. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like the long-awaited match will finally be starting. Isanor Arena Grounds. Ugh, what luck, right? Kevin said with a wry smile on his face. He was currently standing opposite me and he had a casual look on his face. But having known him for long enough, I knew that he was currently on his highest guard. I shook my head when I saw this. It really is terrible luck. Ever since the day of the matchup I had been unable to see Kevin, and today was the first time that I saw him after a long time. Looking at each other in the eyes, we could tell that we both thought of this situation as ridiculous, but at the end of the day we really couldn't do anything about it. It was what it was. Hey Rin. Kevin called out for me, his voice sounding extremely serious. What is it? You better not hold back on me. Yes, I know. My eyes rolled when I heard this. Wasn't planning to. I wanted to see just how much stronger I was compared to Kevin. Also, knowing Kevin's personality, he would probably end up getting mad at me if I didn't take him seriously. He had his own pride after all, but I mean, who didn't? If I had to be honest, I had a pretty big ego myself, and this probably explained where my pettiness came from. So, being the respectable person that I was going to beat him up. Swoosh. A soft breeze suddenly brushed past my body as I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Once I opened up my eyes again, I found the referee standing in the middle of the arena. Silence descended in the arena at the appearance of the referee. Turning his head to glance in both of our directions, Kevin and I both nodded our heads. Following this, raising his hand, the referee shouted, "Begin." Chapter 442. Begin. The referee's thunderous voice boomed throughout the arena. Following his words, Kevin flourished his broadsword. The broadsword was about 3 feet in length, and its sharp edge directly reflected the glaring light coming down from the sun. As the broadsword appeared in Kevin's hand, I watched as his muscles bulged outwards and his hand lowered slightly. A clear indication of just how heavy the weapon was. Shing. With a light sound, Kevin's sword became enshrouded by a red hue visible to the naked eye. Slowly, layers upon layers of crimson air emanated from Kevin's sword. At this moment, despite the referee's words, neither one of us moved. A heavy tension enveloped the entire arena. As I gazed in Kevin's direction, an indomitable aura escaped from his body as it billowed outwards. I grew solemn when I saw this. Taking a deep breath, time seemed to come to a standstill. Then, at the exact moment that I started to exhale, Kevin's body disappeared from the spot. Sheeing. Unsheathing my sword and coating my sword with mana, I pressed my foot on the ground and shot forward. In a second, Kevin's figure appeared right in front of me. Clank. A loud metallic ring spread in the air as Kevin's sword met mine. Sparks flew in the air and a strong pressurized wind expanded outwardly, resulting in my clothes to flutter, releasing a paper-like sound. The clash lasted only for a brief moment, and once the momentum of our attack dissipated, Kevin's body took a couple of steps back and so did I. Stabilizing my body, lifting my head, my eyes met with Kevin's. Not bad. I ended up muttering when I looked at Kevin. From the first exchange I could somewhat gauge his strength. It was just a little bit weaker than mine, but it also had to be noted that Kevin still had multiple tricks up his sleeve. "You're not bad yourself," Kevin replied back with a voice filled with heavy solemnness. Then, raising his sword once again, he disappeared from his spot before reappearing a couple of meters away from me. With his sword above his head, he slashed diagonally down. A red glow enveloped his sword, and the speed at which it was hurtling towards me was quite frankly terrifying, but it was still manageable. Twisting the heel of my foot on the ground, I turned my body to the side and swung upwardly, trying to meet his sword dead on. Clank. Once again a clear metallic ring resounded throughout the whole arena grounds, as my clothes flapped even more wildly. The hairband which I had used to tie my hair came undone, and my hair scattered all over my face, preventing me from seeing what was happening in front of me. This may have flustered the normal person, but I was somewhat used to this situation as the mana inside of my body erupted in an outward manner, and I put all my force onto my sword, resulting in Kevin's body being pushed back a couple of meters back. It was enough for me to catch my breath and fix my hair. I seriously need to cut my hair, I thought to myself as I brushed my hair behind me. Although it normally wasn't a problem, it still was a hassle. Especially in big fights when my hairband would always come undone. It was either cutting my hair or buying a better hairband. Sheeing. Snapping me out of my own delusions, I suddenly felt a tremendous force come from opposite me. Like a torrential wave of energy, a bright red light suddenly enveloped Kevin's sword. Following this, a terrifying pressure bore down on the arena. Taking a step forward with a loud bang, the ground beneath Kevin cracked apart. The muscles on Kevin's body suddenly bulged upwards, and his veins became more prominent. Wiggling around like worms. "HAA!" Kevin cried out. Both hands held the broadsword and with a sudden and swift movement he slashed downwards. As Kevin slashed, his imposing aura suddenly rose. The air around him began to distort as if there was an invisible current flowing around him, and agglomerating into his long broadsword. Boom! A thunderous explosion followed after as a powerful sword energy came crashing down on me. Feeling the power contained within the attack, my brows couldn't help but frown. Activating Eyes of Kronos, the world around me started to slow down and Kevin's attack stopped. Sensing the mana in the air, I calmly analyzed my situation before reducing the effect of the skill, allowing for time to flow a little bit faster. In my vision, Kevin's sword started to move at a snail's pace. My eyes started to strain once I did this, however, it was a necessary price that I needed to pay. Tensing the muscles of my right hand which was holding onto my sword, I channeled all my mana towards it, creating a small even green coating. Then, deactivating the effects of Eyes of Kronos, taking a step forward, I slashed out. The moment I slashed out, the mana inside of my body began to stir. Following which, a powerful attack shot out from my sword, meeting Kevin's attack head-on. Like a metallic ring spread throughout the arena as my feet sank to the ground, and my foot became trapped in the thick floor. Glaring at me from above was Kevin, who slashed down with all his might. Kevin was using a broadsword which was incomparably heavier than my sword. Although my sword had an effect that could make it become heavier at the moment, it was of no use. Kevin's sword was above mine, and increasing the mass would only put me in a disadvantageous situation. As a result of this, he came out on top in this exchange. Caw! Gritting my teeth, I pushed back with all my strength and just barely managed to push Kevin's broadsword away. But Kevin backflipped into the air, and as he was airborne, his body twisted at a weird angle and his broadsword drew a majestic arc, aiming straight for my neck. The attack came flying at me at an incredible speed. Fortunately, I had an ace up my sleeve with regards to speed attacks. That was none other than Eyes of Kronos. And ranked skill and the strongest skill in my arsenal. Time once again slowed down as my eyes darted all over Kevin. Soon the chip inside of my head started to process everything at a rate matching the speed at which my eyes could see. And using the data coming from Kevin's muscle movements and current sword trajectory, I was able to get a clear idea of where the sword was going to land. Deactivating Eyes of Kronos, I merely took a step to the right at a fourth 3-degree angle from where I was standing. Shing. A cold air blew past my face as Kevin's attack completely missed. Taking advantage of this moment, raising my hand, I smacked in a downward manner, aiming for the back of his neck. But as though he had eyes at the back of his head, Kevin pressed the palm of his hands on the ground and once again twisted his body at a weird angle, just barely avoiding my attack. The next thing that Kevin did truly shocked me. Putting his broadsword back in his dimensional space and raising his legs, Kevin wrapped his legs around my arm. Then grabbing onto it with both hands, he locked my arm into an arm bar. I suddenly felt a muscle-tearing pain course through my body. Just for a second my knee almost gave out. However, gritting my teeth, I tensed my arm and raised it in the air with Kevin still latched onto it. Air fork. Raising my arm in the air, I could feel Kevin's lock tighten. Nevertheless, gritting my teeth, my arm soon raised all the way towards the top of my head. Once that happened, I smashed my arm towards the ground. All of this happened within the course of a couple of seconds, and so Kevin wasn't able to properly get a hold of my arm. Sensing the imminent danger, Kevin finally let go of my arm. But I wasn't going to let him go off the hook that easily. Just as he released the grip on my arm, placing the plan of my hand on the ground to support my body, I twisted my legs and aimed a kick towards the side of his body, hitting him cleanly in the chest and sending him crashing in the distance. Bang! With a loud bang, his figure landed a couple of meters away from me. Standing up and finally taking a breather, I massaged my arm, which was aching in pain. Shit, I might have torn a muscle. I thought to myself as I felt an electrifying feeling wash over my body whenever I tried to move my arm. However, this was nothing much. Grabbing a potion, I quickly downed it and the pain slowly started to disappear. Doing a similar thing by the other side of the arena, Kevin once again took out his broadsword as a powerful hue sprung out of his body. Also taking out my weapon, I channeled all of my mana into my sword, forming a thin green hue around it. Raising my head and meeting Kevin's line of sight, I smirked. Then, pressing my foot onto the ground, I propelled my body in his direction as I slashed down with all my might. Everything happened in a split second, but the moment I arrived in front of Kevin, what met my sight was the sharp end of his broadsword quickly heading for my face. Turning my foot at a 180-degree angle to halt my body, I similarly slashed to meet his attack. Boom! Yet again, a thunderous explosion reverberated throughout the whole arena as the ground trembled, and both Kevin and I were pushed back. Steadying my feet, I looked up. There I saw Kevin looking back at me with a very solemn look. "What's wrong?" I asked, clicking my tongue and trying to hide the fact that my arm was currently trembling from the previous exchange. "Something bothering you?" I lowered my sword slightly. In response to my question, Kevin shook his head. "Nah, I was thinking that it's about time the two of us get serious." "Oh." Kevin rolled his eyes. Lowering his body, he took a stance as an even more terrifying red hue sprang out on his body. As the hue covered the sky, dyeing it red with his color, he icily said, "Let's stop messing about. I know you're also holding back." "Fine." I sighed. Kevin was right. It was about time that we ended the warm-up. Lifting my hand, I put my sword back into the scabbard. Moving my foot behind me, I took a deep breath as I circulated all of the mana inside of my body to the maximum. However, right before I was preparing to take things seriously, I shouted, "Get ready, Kevin, this is revenge for all the stalking you did." "Huh." The moment those words escaped from my mouth, Kevin almost tripped on his own feet. The hue around his body shrank considerably. Raising his head, he rebutted, "If I don't recall wrongly, you were the first stalker. But you didn't know that. What does knowing have anything to do with the fact that you still stalked first?" Kevin asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Shrugging my shoulders, I replied, "Let me remind you that I've also saved your life." "What, you?" Kevin's face twisted drastically before the hue around his body intensified many folds. "Talk about ungrateful," I mumbled in a voice loud enough for Kevin to hear. The red hue surging out of his body increased by another fold. Sensing the power coming from Kevin's body, The smile on my face disappeared as I too channeled every last bit of strength inside of my body. Following this, my aura and Kevin's aura clashed in the middle of the stage. Chapter 443. Human Domain Broadcasting Studios. Kevin and Ren looked to be evenly matched so far. Lorena commented whilst staring at the screen in front of her. Sitting beside her, Zach nodded his head in agreement. You're absolutely correct. The two contestants seem to be perfectly matched at the moment. Whenever one of the two has the upper hand, the other quickly pulls out a new move to once again regain the upper hand. Pressing both of his hands on the table, Zach leaned forward to get a better look at the battle. Staring at the battle, Zach's eyes started to hurt. He was so mesmerized by what he was seeing. So much so that he forgot to blink his eyes multiple times, and when he realized, his eyes had already started to sting. But he didn't mind the pain. He felt that it was worth it. Never in his life had he seen two ranks be so strong. It was truly shocking. Lorena was also experiencing a similar situation as Zach, as she too couldn't take her eyes away from the screen. Fortunately, the two of them weren't the only people present in the studio, as one of the staff helped Lorena recollect herself. Smiling brightly, Lorena looked at Zach and asked, "Zach, after seeing the match, are you still of the opinion that Kevin will win?" Caught by surprise by the sudden question, Zach had a dumb look on his face. Thankfully, he was able to recollect himself quickly. He had plenty of experience, and so, smiling toward the cameras, he nodded his head. Yes, of course. Extending his hand, he pointed toward the main screen and started to share his analysis of the situation. As you've most probably seen by now, although the two of them seem evenly matched, if you pay close attention, neither is going all out. Let's be real, the two of them seem to be treating this more like a friendly spar than an actual fight. Hearing Zach's word from the side, Lorena subconsciously nodded her head. It was as he said. Although the fight between the two was extremely intense, there was no real sense of crisis like in the previous matches. It felt more like a match between friends more than anything else. From the last match, most of you have already done your research on the two contestants. Therefore, you should already know that the two of them are close friends. That's correct, Lorena said before adding. But what does that have to do with you keeping your decision about Kevin being the victor? Nothing really. I just wanted to say that even though they are evenly matched, Kevin has still not gone all out. Once he does, Ren won't be able to beat him, even if he also is holding back. His words were firm when he said this. As he had already declared Kevin to be the victor, he was going to stick to it till the end. Lorena squinted her eyes. Her eyes were filled with doubt, however. Since Zach was an expert in this field, she decided to no longer question his analysis. At the end of the day, only time would reveal the true victor of the fight. Before Lorena could further comment on the matter, Zach suddenly stood up and his voice raised. "Oh, it looks like Kevin and Ren will be finally going all out." Startled, Lorena turned her head and stared at the screen where the match was currently being broadcasted, and there she saw two enormous hues clashing in the arena. One red and one white. Waves of billowing heat flowed outwardly from Kevin's body, as he channeled the fire scions in his body. A sizzling, feverish swelter enveloped the arena grounds as the temperature shot up. With each second that passed, the greater the hue around Kevin's body became. Standing on the opposite end of him was Ren. Similarly, mana began to sprout out of his body. Howling gales of strong wind formed as a result of his power, scattering in all directions. The two hues covered half of the arena each and slowly threatened to devour each other. Standing in the middle of each hue were the blurred figures of Ren and Kevin, who held onto their weapons tightly. Neither one of them moved as they both stood motionless. "It's finally starting," Lorena muttered underneath her breath. It wasn't just her, Lorena, who saw this, but almost everyone in the world witnessed the same scene as they held their breath, eagerly waiting for the moment when the two figures would finally reveal their true powers to the world. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait for long. Boom! A thunderous explosion reverberated throughout the studio speakers as Kevin's and Ren's figures suddenly disappeared from their spot, reappearing in front of each other. Before either could even unleash their attacks, the tournament ground beneath them cracked apart, and dust instantly rose in the air, masking the eyesight of the viewers watching. Bang! It didn't take long for the dust to clear, and once the dust cleared out, there was another deafening sound of an explosion. The momentum of Kevin's broadsword was like a tsunami, and the limitless red hue came crashing down on Ren's body with unstoppable momentum. As Kevin slashed, he made sure to keep his eyes locked onto Ren. To his shock, he just stared at his attack with a dull look in his eyes. Before Kevin could react, a subtle clicking sound rang out. Click. Ren's hand blurred and Kevin's broadsword suddenly met an incredible resistance. Kih. Pressing both of his feet on the ground, the veins on Kevin's neck protruded outwardly as he used all of his strength to push forward, trying to gain the upper hand against Ren. However, regardless of how much he pushed, Ren's body wouldn't budge. Ha! Kevin let out a low cry. Like a phantasmal ghost, his figure faded into the air before suddenly reappearing by Ren's side. This was so fast that Ren was unable to react on time. Furthermore, before anyone could even realize it, Kevin had switched from a broadsword to a sword. His movements became incomparably faster, and in a flash his sword struck out a couple of dozen times. A tight net of deadly sword attacks formed around Ren, trapping him completely. Kevin's swordsmanship dazzled the crowd as they found it to have reached a point near perfection. For someone as young as him to have reached this level of swordsmanship, the crowd opened their mouth in awe. Even Lorena and Zach were left speechless by Kevin's dazzling sword mastery. It was just too shocking. Staring at Kevin's lightning-fast attacks, the audience shared the same thought. He can't dodge that. Not only were the strikes incredibly fast and powerful, but they were also incredibly numerous, creating this sort of net that left him with no way out. Instantly, some of the viewers watching closed their eyes. They didn't want to see what would be made of Ren's body once he came in contact with Kevin's attack. All these thoughts occurred in an instant. Between Kevin's masterful and extremely fast attacks, almost everyone in the audience thought that Ren was going to sustain heavy injuries. But at this moment, Ren touched the sheath of his sword. Nice try. His soft voice reached Kevin's ears. Before Kevin could even react, the hue revolving around Ren's body sprang out like never before, reaching for the sky at an unimaginable momentum that left the audience baffled. Following this, a subtle and familiar clicking sound rang out. Kevin's eyes instantly opened wide as he cursed out loud. Shit. Click. Time seemed to have come to a standstill following the subtle clicking sound. The silence did not last for long, however, as everyone's eyes opened wide. Prick, prick, prick. Dissecting into thousands of equal pieces, the area around Ren distorted. The ground cracked before splitting into multiple even pieces, and the sky itself seemed to be torn apart as Kevin's attack disappeared into nothingness. Shooting up like projectiles were the remnant pieces of the rocks that had been split by Ren's sudden attack. The audience who was watching stiffened up on the spot and their hearts froze. What had they just witnessed? It felt as though they had watched someone split the world with a single sword. It was incredible. Poochie. Following the attack, blood splurted towards the ground. Bang. Crashing onto the other end of the arena was Kevin's haggard figure. Blood dripped down from his body as his clothes were torn into bits and pieces. Fuck. Weakly standing up, Kevin wiped the side of his mouth. Grabbing onto the side of his shoulder, he cursed to himself. At this moment he was counting his lucky stars. The move that Ren had just done. He had seen it before. Back when he had fought him with Jean and the others. This was Ren's strongest move and was something that he had not used when fighting against Chimer. Had he used it, Kevin was sure that Ren would have had a much easier time in his fight. But it was also the reason why he knew this skill that he was able to still be standing. Although his injuries looked serious, they weren't anything to be worried about. At the very last moment when he realized that Ren was about to use that skill, he used overdrive and managed to narrowly avoid his attack. Of course, he had paid a price for this. He had at least cracked a couple of ribs. Keith. Holding on to the side of his chest, Kevin grit his teeth and endured the pain he was suffering. Bang. Without wasting any time, still under the effects of overdrive, pressing his foot onto the ground, the red hue around Kevin's body expanded rapidly. In a heartbeat he appeared before Ren. Switching from sword to broadsword once again, he slashed down. The first movement of the Levi Shaw style. Like. Ren's feet sunk onto the ground as his sword met Kevin's broadsword. Not giving Ren enough time to react, Kevin raised his broadsword again and slashed out. The second movement of the Levi Shaw style. Like. This time the ringing sound became even more powerful as Ren's feet sank beneath the ground even more. Raising his broadsword, Kevin repeated the movement again. Like. Every time Kevin attacked, The red hue revolving around his body became even firmer. Not only did his attacks become more powerful, but they also increased in speed. Furthermore, thanks to the effects of overdrive, Kevin was in a state where he could continuously attack without leaving Ren any room to breathe. Slowly but surely, the strength of his attacks increased more and more, and by the time he had reached the 20th attack, Ren was already on one knee to the ground. When the audience saw this, their hearts started to palpitate. Is this it? Is Kevin going to be the one that will emerge victorious in the end? Everyone shared the same thought as they watched Ren's figure slowly but surely lower. Staring at the match from the studio, a pleased smile appeared on Zach's face as he looked at this development. His analysis was once again correct. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears as... But just as he was about to finish his sentence, his face froze. Not only him but everyone that was watching froze as their eyes opened wide in shock. Striking once again, the hue revolving around Kevin's body became even thicker. It was now the 20th move and he was preparing to end the match right now. Although he had managed to keep Ren suppressed for now, he knew that he didn't have much time. The side effects of overdrive were starting to kick in. Raising his broadsword once again, the hue enveloping Kevin's broadsword funneled in the air like a tall pillar as a terrifying pressure bore down on the whole arena. Hiya! He screamed at the top of his lungs as he raised his broadsword above his head. Lowering his head and staring at Ren, who had his head lowered, Kevin mumbled, "Sorry Ren, but this will be my victory." However, just as he was about to slash down, Ren finally raised his head and with a playful smile on his face he asked, "Had enough fun? What?" Seeing Ren's smile, a flustered look appeared on Kevin's face as he felt an ominous premonition. Before Kevin could make out what was happening, to his horror, over 30 rings suddenly sprung out from Ren's body as they completely encircled him. Then something shocking happened. Slowly moving around him like satellites, Kevin watched as the rings turned, resulting in the flame scions around his body trembling uncontrollably. His attack, which he had stacked up for so long, suddenly lost most of his power. And before he could make heads or tails of the situation, a powerful force came crashing down on his chest, forcing him onto his knees. Kahawk. The force was so strong that Kevin almost felt the urge to puke. Trying his best to breathe, something hard smacked onto his right hand and his broadsword flew towards the distance. The sound of his broadsword clattering in the distance rang in Kevin's head as realization soon dawned on him. Weakly lifting his head up, Kevin saw Ren looking at him with a lazy smile on his face. Placing his sword in front of his head, he slowly said, "Looks like you still have a long way before reaching my level.